Hey, greetings. This is Sieg with leadership quality number 4, and this is all part of our series here on the Renegade blog. So we just went through leadership quality number 3, and we're on to leadership quality number 4. And this one is about leaders who inspire others to action, often through a selfless manner. So before I go into kind of the nitty-gritty of it, I want to just share some illustrations of that. They say leadership begins in the home, right? And it does, and it more so starts with you. My dad demonstrated this a lot. In terms of the inspiration, it was in his nature. He's a physicist. So growing up, it was always, this is typically how it played out for me. Family of 5 children, right? And we'd be sitting down for dinner. Back in the day, it used to be the whole family would eat together. And this is what would happen so often. I have an idea. That'd be my dad. I have an idea. And we kids go, oh, Dad. Oh, what do you got now, Dad? And, I'm going to invent. And then he'd announce what it was. Or, I know a better way. And he was always, is that proverbial eureka moment, right? And for some reason it was at the kitchen table, the dinner table, and that makes sense. You're there gathered as a family. But I remember that so much that was the norm growing up for me. There was no lack for, speaking of the inspiration, inspiring others into action, because it was going on constantly. He was an inventor, is an inventor. He's now 83 and he's still inventing, and he applies for patents. It's in his nature, and that's just who he is. He's a creator. And with the garage, which was detached, a detached garage, he would always after dinner say, well, I'm going to go out and tinker for a while. Tinker. I mean, how many people use that word anymore? Tinker. There were tinker toys. Well, that's what he would do. So he'd go out in the garage after dinner and he would tinker. So that was me seeing that action taking place, that this is a world of possibility, of potentiality, because my dad was constantly doing it. From an invention to how to cut a tomato in the perfect way, to creating lighting inventions and all that stuff. So I grew up with that. But now I did say that leaders inspire others to action because of their often their selflessness that they demonstrate. That too is true. I remember a specific incident with my dad where we went down south to visit my aunt, and she's a rather small home, and there was really very little sleeping space. And without question, my dad, he just went in the Suburban. I drove down with our family Suburban, and he chose to sleep in the car. Because there really was not much room. He didn't sleep on the floor. He slept in the car. And I remember going out there the next morning. There was my dad all scrunched up in his Suburban, and he had to have been in his 60s or 70s. I don't know. I suppose it was 60s, sleeping scrunched up in the car. And it was cool too. It wasn't winter, but it was cool. And that was normal to see that. And without any kind of pronouncement of the big sacrifice he was going to make and all this, he just did it. So he led by action and through the inspiration that he had, and he demonstrated things selflessly. Okay, that inspires people. And it also elevates the conversation up from when a lot of people, when they get inspired with their ideas, a lot of times can get mucked up. And this being more so for business, okay, because that's who these are oriented to. These leadership videos is for entrepreneurs and business owners. A lot of times, all of that, the inspiration and freshness and all the forward thinking, can very quickly get mucked up, because if it has to do with executing it via people, well, then what often stops a lot of people is if-then conversations in the head. Yeah, but if he does this and that, and they're just going to parse it all apart. And this is normal. It's the whole fairness thing. And so the vision casting, the true inspiration that could have otherwise been, just remains down here. Because I'm gonna pick this thing apart, and I'm gonna make sure that everything just works out perfectly fair and square, or it's not gonna happen. And then it never gets off the launching pad. because it's all mucked up down at this lower level. And guess what? Nobody ends up following any kind of vision. No vision ever gets executed. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't be wise about all this and totally circumvent the conversations that need to be had, but this is where a different type of leader rises out of this heap, if you will, and it's leaders who live in a space and demonstrate of how the world ought to be, how it should be, and they exercise and they work in that space at a higher realm and a higher level than down here in the whole purely staying grounded in the whole negotiation space and the whole fairness space. They will never go to that next level of leadership inspiration. It's just not going to happen. I mean, this grunt work that has to happen with the parsing out thing, that could go on forever. And you never get to this level. Because this one attracts a whole another level of energy into that when the leader is really living in that space of their vision and expressing that. And, you know, I hear people use that phrase of abundance mentality and all that. But it's so strong, it's so grounded. There isn't these dynamics down here that's holding them back. And as long as they stay present in that, it just scales and it grows as people sense that and come alongside and align themselves with this, because most people they want to live above and beyond this. They want to be inspired by that selflessness, and someone who's been able to overcome great odds is often a part of that too. When they share that part of their story, that you come to find out, wow, what did they overcome? And you would have had no idea that this person, you think they've always walked in that space, but they actually overcame significant odds. And so this is an entirely different realm in the leadership space where you start to see and live in this presence of what the world should and ought to be like. And I think a big aspect of this that really elevates people and gets them in a space of inspiration, and more importantly, action, is potentiality. Because when it's down in this lower conversation, that's not what they're seeing. They're seeing the potentiality, but in a negative way, of how everything's going to go south on them. Instead of the potentiality of, no, this is going to come about, this is going to come to fruition, because my belief is so strong, it will overcome any of these odds. So we're going to live and operate at this space instead. And they see the potentiality of all the people they're working with, a greater and better outcome, rather than parsing it down at the lower level. And that takes a lot of power, of strength, of conviction and belief to live in this space. It is almost like superhuman space, because your beliefs, that the whole gut feeling, the limbic brain kicks in, and you just know this to be true. You know this to be true of your vision and of how things ought to and should be, and living and operating that space, that you start to break off all the previous models of how the rules are supposed to be played, because you're operating in a completely different realm. So watch for that, and if you could, comment below in two regards. I want you to comment, first of all, if you've ever experienced, ever been a part of that, the type of leadership that inspires you into action. I'm sure it's going to vary dramatically for all of you, whether it's a close relationship like what I was just sharing, or it's in business. But go ahead and share that. And then secondly, think for yourself. And this is a higher level kind of thing, but what could you do to scale your leadership to get into more of this space? And perhaps it just begins with how things should and ought to be, which is somewhat of a visionary aspect. This is what people follow, are visionaries. They see a better way, because ultimately most everybody, they're looking to be lifted out of their current circumstances, be that external or internal. External or internal, and most are slaves because of the internal. And they want to get lifted out of that. Well, it's going to take a higher level leader to do that, to see potentiality, and for this person to see, I can move up and out of my current circumstances. Whether they're self-imposed, external imposed, But that's what they want. This is what people crave more than anything in humanity, is to be lifted out of their current circumstances into a betterment space. Are you going to help create that space of betterment? And most of it is found in the wholeness of spirit and mind, more than physical. It's in the realm of spirit and mind. So go ahead and share your comments with me. I'd love to read them and interact with you. Thanks so much, and I will see you in Leadership Quality number 5.